The father of 18-year-old camp counselor Chloe Childress, who died during the deadly July 4th flooding in the Texas Hill Country, says outdoor warning sirens could have saved lives. This week on Inside the Investigation, investigative reporter Matt Grant explains how one community is rushing to prepare for future disaster. Welcome to the Investigates office. I'm Kelly Wiley, and I'm here with my desk mate, Matt Grant. Thank you for joining me here.
Thanks so much for having me. I didn't have to travel a long way to talk to you.
We didn't have to travel very far at all.
Just go from my desk to here. It's kind of nice.
It's a nice commute.
Yeah.
But Matt, you have been staying on the story when it comes to these devastating flash floods that happened over July 4th weekend, the floods that killed 130 people, 27 of them Camp Mystic counselors and campers. What has it been like covering this story?
It's been difficult. I mean, the scale of what we saw back in July, I mean, it was catastrophic and devastating. So many people were killed, young children were killed. And after that, there were a lot of questions that were raised, legitimate questions about, did this many people need to die? And could something have been done, or a series of things could have been done beforehand that could have minimized the damage? And that's what we've really been trying to get at. That's the heart of it. After all of this devastation on behalf of the families, we're asking these questions, what could have been done differently? And that's really what we've been after and what we've been doing since the start. And it's been hard, you know, I mean, this is a very sensitive story, but these are important questions and they need to be asked.
They're so important, and I mean, it's hard to believe that it's not even been a year since this has happened, and the amount that you've been able to uncover, the amount our team has been able to uncover. Part of you covering this is that you got a chance to sit down with one of the parents of one of the girls, an Austin girl, an Austin ISD student, Lenny McCown. What was it like talking to them?
Yeah, you said not even a year, not even 4 months, right? I mean, this just happened just a couple months ago over the summer. We did an exclusive interview. We were the first station that the family talked to. Michael and Callie McCown, their daughter, 8-year-old Lenny. This was her first time ever at sleepaway camp. She was really looking forward to it, and she was going with some friends. She loved to dance. She was doing gymnastics. Her father said she was his angel. And hearing their story, I can't imagine the grief and the pain that they're going through. And they've now channeled that into advocacy. They don't want anyone else to experience the loss that they did. And so it was really powerful and moving to hear about Lenny and seeing the photos that they shared of her and the videos and spending a lot of time with them. It's moving, you know, and hearing their story, it's really sad. And the mom, she had all these colorful bracelets on her arm representing the names of the different girls who were killed. So, you know, it's about Lenny, but it's not just about Lenny. There were 27 campers and counselors who died at Camp Mystic, and more than 100 across the region. So really, you know, it's their story, but it's a lot of other family stories too. But yeah, it was really sad hearing about what she went through, what the family is currently going through, and the changes they're pushing for to hope prevent anything like this from happening again to this scale.
I remember I went to Lenny's vigil at Cassis Elementary where she went to school, and it was she touched so many lives. You just realize, even in Austin, what the impact was. All these kids, all their parents, Congressman Doggett was there at the time, and you could really see, even just with one little girl, how many people were wrecked by what happened.
And it just shows you the scale and how this tragedy touched so many people's lives. Everyone in the state, you know, felt horrible about what happened. And different communities where the girls had come from were doing similar, you know, memorial services as well. This touched so many people. And yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what that was like for you going to cover that.
I will never forget it. It was a lot to take in, and it's why the work that you've been doing really is so important. Okay, so let's talk more about what you looked at with this investigation. What made you want to focus specifically on flood sirens and the the impact or lack of impact that they had in this particular case?
Yeah, so in the days after the flooding, there were a number of proposals that were brought up and talked about. One of them, I think it was on July 7th, Senator Paul Betancourt, we talked to him, and one of the things that he was proposing just days after the flooding were sirens. Kirk County, the area where Camp Mystic was located in, they didn't have any warning sirens. This is an area where local officials said is among the most dangerous in the United States. It's in an area that is referred to as Flash Flood Alley. It's an area where local officials had warned just back in 2017 that there was the potential for, quote, monstrous flooding. People knew this was a dangerous area. And so part of that and the discussion after the flooding centered around a number of things, right? Camp safety changes, but another change that was brought up, which ultimately passed into law, was flood sirens. And the Upper Guadalupe River Authority faced a lot of criticism when lawmakers came to Kerrville and grilled them and said, why didn't you have flood sirens? They did apply for them over the years. There was concern and there was issues over funding sources. They applied for state grants. They were denied. They refused to apply for one recently last year because the funding levels weren't going to be enough. This was a very contentious issue, and because of that, we wanted to dive into it more. This really came up at the end of July during the Kerrville hearing. And when I was watching that, I was there, and when I was watching the back and forth with the UGRA director, and they were talking about flood sirens, that's when we kind of started thinking, well, how many other counties do have flood sirens? It was a big part of the legislation in one of the Senate bills that was passed, and so we wanted to take a broader look. How will this grant money affect them? Where are these sirens located? Which counties have them and don't? And so that was kind of the spark for this story.
And it's incredible to think, like you mentioned, I don't think anyone who went out to Kerr from our station could understand in a place, like you said, where they're very used to flooding, and then they know that there's the possibility of it being extremely deadly and dangerous, that they wouldn't have them. It's hard to think about that. I'm curious though, what are there downsides to having them? How do they work? What's the conversation around whether or not they're effective?
So advocates say they can be very effective, that it will create a loud noise. If you're outside, you'll hear it, you'll know immediately to get out of the area. And a lot of times the sirens are connected to river gauges and sensors, so when the river gets to a certain level, it will automatically trigger an alarm. And so advocates say this is a great tool, one tool of many, but one important tool that should be utilized in communities to mitigate risk. Opponents, though, will say, look, these sirens they can be very expensive. They require routine maintenance. They've been described as antiquated technology, especially when you compare them to more modern means like mobile alerts, text alerts. Senator Betancourt, though, when I interviewed him, he held up his cell phone and he was like, look, we're too overloaded with these alerts. You get alerts for everything and people just end up tuning them out.
Jaded to it.
Right, so if you hear a siren, you're gonna automatically know, okay, danger, I gotta get out. And even if that's just a couple minutes, that warning time, he says, could give people enough leeway to get out of the area. So it's been a discussion, but one of the things that has come up recently in our reporting is that there are concerns, and among them is the siren sounds itself. So when you hear the siren go off, right, you might think, okay, danger, I got to get out of the area. Well, we went down to Martindale. They had two sirens that had just been kept forgotten about, dormant for years. And it wasn't until the July 4th flooding and a little bit before then that they realized we need to get these back up and working. We were there when they tested them in early October. First time they've tested them in years. They did two different tests. One was for a flood warning, one was for a tornado warning. Now, what they're saying and what they acknowledge is a concern, and what experts we've talked to say is also a concern, is that the siren sounds are different and they necessitate different responses.
Okay.
A flood response, a flood sound, you might want to go to higher ground. You might want to evacuate.
Right.
A tornado siren is different. You don't want to. You want to shelter in place for a tornado. The last thing you want to do is
go outside and get on the roof.
Go out and stand on a hilltop. You know.
Right.
And so, because they require different responses, people are saying that it shouldn't just be the installation of the sirens. That the funding shouldn't just go towards that, but it should also go towards the education component. The key is to get people to know the difference between the different sounds, educate them so when they hear them, it's not a surprise. They know what they're expecting. We saw confusion just a couple months ago, San Marcos, right? They had sirens. They temporarily disabled them because residents were confused. They thought a tornado was coming when it was a flood.
Oh, wow.
And just a couple days ago, they had another problem with technical issues. And so making sure that they're working is important. Making sure that the public understands them, also equally important.
Could you tell the difference? You said they play both.
Well, when you hear it, and beforehand, I didn't know what to expect.
Right.
When you hear it, you can kind of tell the difference, but you got to really listen for it, and you got to know what you're listening for. We have on our website at KXAN.com, you can actually see and hear the difference for yourselves. We've got the flood warning, and then immediately afterwards, we've got the tornado warning. So you can hear the difference. I'm curious to know what our viewers think, if they know the difference between it. And that's something that officials say will be in addition to layered warning signs. So, when the siren's going off, ideally there's also going to be text alerts going off too. And so you'll be able to see on your phone as well, a tornado in the area or flood warning. And so there will be other cues to supplement that. But if you're outside, if you're in an area where you don't have good cell service or, for whatever reason, you got to make sure you at least understand it. And so that's one of the things that experts we talk to are saying, lawmakers also need to pay attention to, that the funding should go in some ways towards educating the public. And really, at this point, we're not really sure how that's going to get out there other than by continued tests and by letting people know about it.
And it kind of brings us right back to Kerr, because you're talking about poor signal, that's a lot of what we heard from people in Kerr County, and particularly around these camps, that either the camps didn't really allow the campers to even have phones, or the signal's really poor and you're not really getting things timely. So where do things stand with Kerr and these kind of safety requirements and the sirens?
Yeah, it's still controversial. Camp Mystic is going to partially reopen next year. That's caused a lot of criticism among some of the families. The camp, though, says that it's not the one that's on the river, and that now is the time. People need the camping. These kids need the camping experience. That's something that's caused a lot of dialogue. And Camp Mystic recently invited lawmakers to come out and tour the property. So when they're evaluating and investigating what went wrong on July 4th, they can see the property and where this happened. And the camp says that that's very important going forward. In terms of warning systems, the Kerr County officials are already in discussion about that. They hope that by next June they'll have something up and ready to be tested. They're looking at contractors for warning systems, and so that conversation is ongoing. We took a broader look at Central Texas communities. We found at least 10 that don't have warning sirens. A number of them now, so in Governor Abbott's disaster declaration back in July, there were 30 counties. Those counties are eligible now for grant funding. And so that money can help pay for warning sirens. And so that's something that going forward, we already know at least in one county, Travis County, they're evaluating where these sirens should go. And so this is a conversation that's going to continue to be going on for the next couple months, where counties who are eligible for these grants, and maybe even some that aren't eligible for the grant money, but now want to invest in public safety, this is a conversation that's going to be going on, for months, if not for years.
Because everybody's eyes are kind of wide open now, right? It's not some possibility in the future. We kind of know exactly what the worst case scenario can look like when all of your warning systems, when all of your preparedness is not in the right place.
Yeah, if this was on the back burner before, it's in the forefront of everyone's minds now.
Matt, well, if there's anything I know about you, you're not going to let up and you're going to keep going and keep trying to better understand what's gone on here. You guys who are watching, definitely go into KXAN.com and tell us in the comments whether or not you can tell the difference between the sounds. I'd love to know, and I'm going to look at it myself. Matt, thank you so much for joining us on Inside the Investigation, and we'll see you guys next time.